Hello indie game fan, in hindsight, my previous video on grimdark games really did have a whole bunch of 2D Souls-likes, so here are 10 more titles which are hopefully more varied, beginning with Valfaris, another side-scrolling title, but throw all of that deliberate stamina-based combat in the trash since this is all action all the time. It is a tale of revenge as our protagonist returns to the fortress planet of Valfaris, seeking vengeance upon his own father, slaughtering hordes of enemies in the process. This game is metal as and while colourful, has its share of blood and guts as well, since you're eviscerating enemies with a variety of powerful weapons, with an interesting checkpointing system and fun weapon upgrades. Swords and Sanctuary was featured in the previous video, but if you go and look at their back catalogue, the Dishwasher Vampire Smile will stand out as well, being a combo-focused action platformer that is pretty brutal and gory. Developer Scar Studios does have quite a signature art and animation style which is present here as well, where the combat is very bloody and you can see that it's from another era since it has vibes of a game that you would find on Newgrounds, but is somewhat of a hidden gem, so check it out if you have not. I'm surprised that I forgot to include first-person shooters in the first video, but I'm making up for that with Devil Daggers, one of the most oppressive and action-packed titles that is quite the challenge on its own. One thing that you might note is that there's no pulse-pounding, heavy metal background music in this game, but rather an oppressive silence filled with the unnatural screams of your enemies and the sound of your weapon, which is very effective and stands out. Structurally, this looks simple since the enemies spawn in the exact same manner at certain time markers where the goal is to survive for as long as you can. But the way that the enemies appear on the horizon from the endless darkness of the void is truly something to behold. Demons and eldritch monsters are all fairly common in the grimdark arena, but I do want to give a special mention to Song of Iron, a gorgeous medieval fantasy title from 2021 that is flying under the radar. If you're impressed or shocked by the brutality of combat in the Game of Thrones TV series, there's more of that here with how weighty combat feels, and while for the most part you're facing off against human enemies, there are fantasy ones like trolls as well, all set in a pretty grimdark medieval world. Hey, remember Scorn? Who can forget that where the developers cite H.R. Geiger as an inspiration, with another game with the same source material being Tormentum Dark Sorrow. In contrast to the action titles that I prefer, this is a point-and-click adventure game where a nameless, amnesiac protagonist has to make sense of the world, where the art in this is truly top-notch. The grotesque designs extend to not just monsters, but the environment itself, creating a very grim world in which to exist, where even if you're not usually an adventure game person, I would implore you to check this out. One thing that I have to thank channel subscribers for is Fear and Hunger, a very grimdark turn-based JRPG, so much so that it does have an adults-only rating and cautions scenes of graphic violence and gore, drug and substance abuse, nudity, self-mutilation and sexual violence, so definitely proceed with caution. One of the main combat mechanics is the ability to target and dismember certain body parts of your enemies, where they can do the same to your characters, definitely being something of interest. I'm back on my boot with the 2D Souls-like Dark Devotion, which, come on, to be fair, does come with the territory. This comes to us from the developer of Astro Ascent, which is very good, more on that linked in the top right, but their earlier title has you playing as a Templar, delving into a fallen temple in the ultimate test of faith. Religious themes plus grimdarkness does go hand in hand, see Blasphemous for example. so this was a natural fit, but I really like the boss designs and animations in this game, although it does get off to a really slow start. I did skip pure horror titles in the list since those games are all grimdark by definition, but I do want to give a very special mention to Dark Wood, a top-down survival horror game that is very intense and terrifying. It is a top-down title set in some dark woods, which might not seem that scary, but the limited vision cone and excellent sound design adds to the tension, since you will often be able to hear enemies long before you see them. It has a day-night cycle, much like something like Terraria, where you get attacked when it is dark, with scarce resources and perhaps intentionally unintuitive combat, which adds to the tension. Necromancy and grimdarkness do go hand in hand, since those are literal sorcerers with the power to reanimate the dead, where in Errata's Lord of the Dead, we really do go down into the granular details, where using the body parts harvested from your enemies to create the undead monsters under your control. This is a Darkest Dungeon style roguelite RPG with positional combat, where the meta progression elements from run to run makes this very compelling, not to mention deliciously macabre. While in simple monochrome pixel art, Unworthy is another overlooked 2D Souls-like that, due to the look, is very dark by definition, where there are all sorts of silhouetted monstrosities to test your mettle against, and for more of these games, watch my earlier video linked right here.